The stench of decay lingered in the air as Detective Eliza stepped over the crumpled body of the young woman. Her skin had turned a sickly shade of grey, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. A feeling crawled under her skin, as though something had taken her soul before she even realized it was gone. Eliza's eyes narrowed as she glanced around the isolated, decaying mansion where the body was found. The old house had been abandoned for years, sitting at the edge of the woods like a forgotten monument to some darker past. There was no trace of any human presence, yet the woman's body had been found in the upstairs study, positioned as if she had collapsed in middle of sentence. Eliza's hand hovered over the woman's outstretched hand, her fingers just a breath away. A soft rustling sound came from the far side of second floor. She drew her gun, stepping further into the room, eyes scanning every corner. The hairs on her neck stood up, but she couldn't afford to be afraid. Over the next few weeks, similar cases popped up. In other parts of the city, young women were found alone in their homes or in secluded locations with no obvious motives behind the killings. The common thread was chilling. Each had been seen near the old mansion days before their demise. As Eliza sifted through the case files, she discovered something even more disturbing. All the victims had been researching the mansion's history. A former owner, Dr. Robert, had been a reclusive scientist in the 1920s, known for his dangerous experiments with unexplained energy sources. Rumors of his dark research persisted, but no evidence had ever been found. Most dismissed the old man's legacy as a myth, but Eliza wasn't so sure anymore. She found a group of amateurs online. The group had been sharing and investigating Dr. Robert's experiments, unknowingly piecing together a trail that led to the mansion. They had dug into public records, old journals, and the scattered, incomplete notes Dr. Robert left behind. Each member contributed to tracing the timeline of deaths and events, slowly building a theory about a dangerous property hidden within the mansion's walls. Their findings were chilling. A series of failed experiments with energy had reportedly left traces of residual radiation, a deadly force that Robert had unsuccessfully attempted to control. The online group had come to one terrifying conclusion: something within the mansion was still active. It had been waiting all this time to be fed. The mansion was likely a part of something, a something that had been operating in the shadows for decades. Eliza couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that the theories weren't just theories anymore. The group was onto something, and they were getting closer. Eliza joined their online discussions under the guise of an anonymous participant, learning what they had uncovered. One user under username Spectre89 was particularly detailed. They had traced the mansion's ownership back to the early 1900s, revealing a secret deal between Dr. Robert and several government officials, an agreement to bury the truth about his dangerous experiments. Documents had been hidden, and some, it seemed, had even been destroyed. In a chilling post, Spectre89 wrote, "We've been searching for answers, but what we've discovered isn't a coincidence. The deaths are connected to something far worse than we thought. Dr. Robert's experiment wasn't just a failed scientific endeavor. It was an attempt to open a doorway, a portal to something beyond our understanding." Eliza felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This couldn't be real. The evidence was mounting when another body was discovered. One of the group members wrote a clear message: someone, or something, didn't want the truth to be uncovered. The investigation took Eliza to the heart of the city's underbelly: shadowy government offices, forgotten archives, and underground networks. She had no idea who to trust anymore. Everything felt shady and tangled. Her own doubts crept in, as she realized she was trapped in a web of secrecy, surrounded by people who either didn't know the whole truth or were too afraid to speak it. Every piece of information she uncovered seemed to confirm that there was more to the mansion than just the mad scientist's legacy. One of the most shocking revelations came when a former colleague of hers, who had worked as a historian specializing in the paranormal, reached out to Eliza in desperation. He had recently been researching Dr. Robert's work as well and discovered something sinister. Before he could share more, he was found dead, his body left in the same manner as the others. The more Eliza learned, the more questions she had. The people she had once trusted were now potential suspects or victims. Eliza's investigation led her back to the mansion. By now she was no longer just looking for answers, she was running out of time. The group she had joined were barely active. Its most engaged members had stopped coming online. Eliza stood outside the mansion's gates, staring at the looming structure. There was no going back. As Eliza stepped inside, the oppressive atmosphere closed in around her. It was as though the house itself was waiting for something, or someone to disturb its secrets. The study where the first body had been found still had the same cold, haunting stillness. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as the air seemed to thicken. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Distorted shadows revealing a door, hidden behind a tapestry. It was a door she hadn't noticed before. Inside the room was unlike anything she'd expected. Papers were scattered everywhere. Scribbled notes and incomplete formulas painted a picture of a mind on the brink of madness. But what struck Eliza most was the large metal structure in the center of the room, a machine, clearly constructed by Dr. Robert himself, and at its core was a strange, pulsating energy source, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the machine. The ground beneath her shook. The machine resembled the gateway Spectre 89 had mentioned, something that Dr. Robert had tried to open, but had never fully controlled. The online group had been right all along, but their discovery had cost them their lives. The truth was out, but it had come at a terrible price. Months later, Eliza's investigation was deemed inconclusive, her findings dismissed. The online group's files had disappeared, their presence wiped from every server. The mansion had been sealed off, its secrets buried once more, while Eliza was written off as obsessed, a fringe theorist with no credibility. The higher-ups dismissed her warnings and made her look crazy, her voice lost in a sea of denial.